Welcome to the inUpowers podcast, where we give a name and a face to emotion. We discuss the real and raw when it comes to mental and emotional health. We are here to teach you that emotions are information and behavior is a choice. We want to help you make safer connections through healthy communication by empowering you to understand what your emotions are telling you. I'm your host, Tammy Hymas. Let's get started. Welcome to the inUpowers podcast. I'm Tammy.
And I'm Nikki.
And today we are going to talk about your happily ever after, or when then, or the someday, or when you're just not satisfied where you are.
And we can all fall into those categories.
Right.
You know, because if then, if this happens, then I'll do this.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. I think we can tend to all be at different stages in our lives doing those kind of things and wanting
our tomorrows instead of enjoying our todays.
Exactly. We're always thinking of the next thing instead of what's happening right now.
Exactly.
Next year, next summer, next.
Once I graduate, or once I finish college, or once I'm married, or once I'm divorced, or once I get to go on this trip, or someday I'll get to do this, or someday I'll get to do that. And we tend to always go to the next step. But how often do we appreciate where we are?
It's true.
When I was a little girl, I was like, okay, someday I'm going to graduate high school. That was a long time ago. And to be quite honest, as soon as I graduated high school, the day I graduated high school, I was really proud of myself. And then I was like, oh, now I have to go to I didn't even relish that I got to someday. I was just ready for the next step.
Well, for me, it was college. Graduating college freaked me out, because it was here.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to school, you graduate high school, and I knew I was going on to college, and college is kind of just like high school was studying in school, and then it was almost like all of a sudden it was here, and now I didn't know what to do with myself.
Right.
And I didn't know how to handle that, because it was always just, when that happens, I'll get a job. When that happens, down the road. And here it was happening, and I didn't know how to handle it.
Right.
It freaked me out. Like, I actually have to adult. I actually have to get a real job. How do I do that? Things like that. Like I couldn't plan the next thing because I didn't know what the next thing was. And then it became the, when I get married, things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and type of stuff. And so, yeah, always looking forward. But then what about all the stuff that was going on when I was in college and all the amazing things I got to do in college and enjoying them and stuff, instead of always thinking, okay, when I graduate, or, when my kids are grown,
Right.
then this. But what about all these times with my kids?
When my kids go to school, or any of it.
Yeah.
We tend to see the next step, but forget that the journey is the joy.
Yes. Finding joy in the journey.
Yeah, that said a lot. And it's true. Are you most happy at the end of the hike? Or is it beginning the hike, planning the hike, going on the hike, seeing the things on the hike, having your fun experiences on the hike, then finishing the hike? Because then you have all that reflection too. It's not the end that's the best. It's all of it as you're going through it.
Well, I think the journey is where you learn the most.
True.
Because, see, if you ask me, because I am not the hiker, planning it would be the fun part. Getting all the supplies and everything would be the fun part. And at the end would be the fun part. But during, when I'm tired and I'm exhausted, I'd be like, why am I on this hike? But at the same time, as I'm going, why am I on this hike? That's when I learn the most about myself and my endurance and my perseverance and who I am and all those things, to where when I get to the end, you're right, then I can turn around and look at all the things. And so, yes, I do think the journey is the most important part, but it also is probably the toughest part.
Well, and I think a lot of times it's the toughest part because we romanticize it.
Yes.
We romanticize someday, and I'm just going to use this as an example from when I was growing up, because princess stories were very popular, and they would always say happily ever after, and you have to find your prince, and that's the stories we read and what we were taught. And so, and my mom was very modern and didn't always say that. She's like, you have to get an education, and you have to have and you have to contribute. Like, my mom taught me a lot. However, that's what you heard. And so I'm like, oh, once I'm married, then it'll be happily ever after. And then we romanticize what it's going to be like. And then we have human moments. We romanticize the hike. And then we have human moments. And then everything falls apart, or we get really distraught, or we get really upset.
Or it doesn't go smoothly, or not the way I had planned it in my head.
Yes.
And when I planned it in my head, it didn't go like that. And now what do I do?
And I think it's easy for us to let our emotions take over and let our stormy emotions take over in those circumstances. And we want what we thought we were going to get, or we don't appreciate where we are because we romanticized it.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear my husband and I went to India with a group of people, and we helped survivors of sex trafficking, and we were talking with people, and the divorce rate there was 3%, and a lot of the marriages were arranged, and I was flabbergasted. And I'm not pro that or against that or anything. I was just flabbergasted, and I'm like, and I was asking through a translator, well, were you in arranged marriage? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, do you guys get along? And they're like, well, we choose to. And it was the most shocking response to me that I've heard in a long time. Because me and my husband choose to too, right? Like, mm-hmm. We have a great time together, but there's sometimes I bug him, and there's times he bugs me, because we're human. And but I was amazed that that's what you do. And it impressed me. I love travel and to see how other cultures teach each other. But they didn't romanticize happily ever after, because they didn't even sometimes pick their spouse.
Right. And I think, because I did the same thing, when someday my prince will come, right?
Right.
And then here I'm getting older, and then here I'm getting older, and then you worry about whether it's going to happen, and everybody's like, oh, it's going to happen when you least expect it. And luckily I did find my spouse, but I know a lot of my friends and people out there that did not. And they're now 50 and not married. And so it didn't work out for them. So being told that this is how the things are supposed to go, and romanticizing that you'll find your husband and you'll live happily ever after and things like that it doesn't happen. So then they have to recover and try to figure out something else.
They have to mourn something that never ever came to fruition. Same with parenting, or going to college, or when somebody is in a tragic accident and they lose a limb. We tend to make expectations in life, or come up with a happily ever after, and then life gets us. and it really can change and make it so that what you thought you could do has changed. And so do you give up?
No.
Or do you find another way?
Well, I think we all find another way, but it's how do we find another way? Do we find another way and are bitter about it because what I thought was going to happen? And I've seen people out there who are bitter about the way that their lives turned out, because it wasn't what they expected or what they planned or what they wanted, and life just turned out different.
And hard things happen to people.
Oh, yeah.
And there is some ugly out there. We're not dismissing that horrible things aren't happening or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, but we can choose.
But after that horrible incident, there is choice.
Oh, yeah. It's just like when my daughter passed away. So my daughter passed away in a car accident, along with her mother-in-law and one of my nieces. And I could be very bitter about the whole thing, and I could have a whole different persona, a whole different outlook. I could have let that loss leave me bitter.
It's true.
But I didn't. I chose to not live that way. Yeah, is my life different? Is my landscape different? Yes. Little things after, after she passed, going to a restaurant, and I'm used to saying 6, and then my kids sit there and say, Mom, we're 5. It's like, oh yeah, right? And things like that. Like, I could have let it really eat me alive, but I chose not to. So it's not that we don't go through hard things. It's and how life just throws us curveballs, but you can choose to be optimistic and choose a new path and have a new outlook, or you can choose to be bitter about it, and I'm not saying one or the other is easier or harder.
No.
Because I can't relate to other people's trials and stuff like that, and people can't relate to mine and stuff, and so we all handle things differently. But I would hope that we would be able to change our perspective, be able to change our trajectory, right, and our expectations to something else, and have other goals, and to set different goals, and to learn from our journey.
Right.
And it's easier said than done, because it didn't happen overnight either. I mean, it takes time, it takes healing, it takes all those things and stuff. But the long term of being healthy and strong through our trials and through our struggles is what I hope we can do. Because things aren't going to turn out the way we want them. Our kids, we want what's best for our kids, and our kids to be these amazing people and clean up their rooms and get good grades and have great friends and do all the sports and do all these things. Yeah.
They're going to turn out how they turn out.
Yes, and they are.
And they're going to make their own choices afterwards.
And we might not like them.
Or we might love them. Either way.
Right, and stuff. And so we can't choose their trajectories, just like they can't choose ours. But that we would love and support our children in whatever way and whatever path that they go on. Right? That
yes,
we'd be willing to instead of romanticizing the ending, to, like you said, enjoy the journey and learn from the journey. And then when you get to the end, to look back and go, look how much I've grown, look how much I've changed, and we might have had a lot of switchbacks in this journey, going back and forth.
Yep.
But we still made it to the end.
In fact, that is a piece of the program. We always say, stay where your hands are. So you're present in your moments. If you're always dreaming about what you could have, you're not living now. And if you're always reflecting on what you wish you were, you're not living now. So you're either dreaming about your happily ever after, or always chasing what you used to be. But if you stay where your hands are, you're actually present for your moments. And then all your moments make a life.
Yeah, I loved the analogy of driving home, because I've done this. I remember when you and I were talking about staying where your hands are, and she's like, Tammy was like, have you ever driven home and don't remember going through the lights or turning or any of those things? And I'm like, yes, I do. Matter of fact, I did just the other day, because my mind was somewhere else. I literally don't remember sitting at the lights and going through traffic and whatnot.
Because driving is a habit we create, and so then it becomes automatic. So then our brain is left to just wander. But if we're actually present in our moments, then you can feel the steering wheel in your hands.
Yeah, well, and know that you sat at the light and went through the lights, and sometimes I went, after you told me, I was like, how did I ever get home? I'm surprised I did not run into anyone, because I literally don't remember
driving home.
There was actually one time I did it because we had moved, and I was so on autopilot that I turned actually and went to my old house and then went, what am I doing? Because it was just so on autopilot, and I wasn't where my hands were. My mind was going to a gazillion other places, and I was just on autopilot.
And when your mind goes to all those places, that's when you can romanticize tomorrows that never exist, or tell yourself that you'll be happy when. Or if this happens, then I can be happy. Or when I get this, then I'll be there. I remember I have asked my husband forever to go to New York. I crave New York. I don't know why. I love the skyline. I love everything about it. I tried to study the streets before I got to it. Like, I really believed, I thought I could just navigate it before I got there. I couldn't. But that was my thought process. I wanted to do it so bad. And then the day we landed, I got to do something I've always wanted to do, because I made that my dream vacation. I was so excited when I got there. And so we went to the Broadway show of Lion King. And that was the day we landed, and flew into it and got into our hotel. And I was so enamored with like, I just looked up at all the skyline, and I loved the theater, and I loved the busyness, and I loved all the people. And I walked up to the counter, and I was smiling, I know, from ear to ear. And the lady at the counter is like, "How are you?" I'm like, "I'm great." And she's like, "Really?" I go, "Oh my goodness, you don't get it. Today's someday." And she said, "What?" I go, "I always said someday I'll get to New York." And I was there. And for a moment, instead of saying someday and dreaming, I was actually living my dream. And I think as humans and as people, when we're living our dream, we forget to appreciate it.
Look at you getting all emotional.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, I love it.
And we celebrate big events like birthdays and weddings and celebrations of life, like funerals of a life long lived. And we really love, we're really present in those moments, but we forget the little ones we dream of. Someday my daughter's going to be able to write her name, but I didn't appreciate her writing her name once she got there, because it was so hard to get there. My son struggled to read, and my dad worked with him all the time. And now I can hear my son read out loud really well. And it's because of years and years of working with him, because he has dyslexia like me, to be able to read. And I take it for granted. And I just, with happily ever after and someday, if we can appreciate today as a someday in some part of your life, a piece of your life, a dream has come true. And a piece of your life, you are living a dream somebody else had for you. And a piece of your life, it is worth it. Then we are really finding what is great in the world and what we can have hope for. We talk about social media and how we can get lost and how we need to be more actionable. And I just want us to recognize that right now, in this very moment, wherever you are listening to this podcast, there is something in your life that was a someday that came true. And you have a reason today to be happy. And you have a reason right now to love your life. And if we can all just love our life a little bit more, we all can love a whole lot more. And with that love, we can really, really, really heal. And we can really, really change our world. And that's my hope. So I got all emotional because I care.
Well, I feel like saying amen. But it's so true, though. You want everyone to have the joy and the love and the happiness the most they can have.
Yes.
You want people to experience life to the fullest in every way to the fullest. You've always been like that. You've always been one to care about the human family and the individual.
Yes.
With your profession, growing up with your profession, you've always worried about the individual and how much they were loved and felt loved and were appreciated, and you always have made them feel special, and you want to do that for the whole human family now.
Yeah.
And you've always been that passionate, and it's one of the things that people love about you.
Thank you.
And don't ever change.
I'm trying not to.
I know, but I just don't want you to ever think that that's wrong. That it's okay. It's a wonderful, wonderful attribute that you have, and your capacity to care and love for others and sharing that with others is an amazing quality.
There's lots of us with it. We have a whole team, and we're doing great things with it. And thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. It makes me a little embarrassed.
I know.
And she's always building me, because my natural is insecure. That is my autopilot that I'm working on. And with this episode, didn't mean to get so emotional. thank you for building me, was to remind you that you don't have to be upset that you're in a journey, and you don't have to wait for tomorrow to find joy, and that today can be your someday. And we're not saying not to dream and not to reflect and not to be miserable. You can be miserable when you're climbing a mountain. It's hard work. And when you're up late at night with a child that you really, really wanted and they're not sleeping and they have a sick tummy and you're so tired, that's hard. And when you're planning a wedding and trying to keep everybody happy for that big wedding day, that's hard. Like, there's hard moments in all of it. But if you're enjoying your moments when you can, and you're trying to find the joy in all of it, you will. And I hope that as we continue to do our podcast and you guys continue to learn more about the inUpowers, you get to see with the inUpowers eyes, which is that you truly are brilliantly made with a superpower, and that you can add to the world, and it is different, and it makes a difference because you exist in it, and that you get to, your thoughts and your actions really will create your tomorrows, and they really are up to you. And we're hoping that they're strong and powerful and that they're full of love. And anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. I think you've said it great. Well done.
Thanks. Well, remember,
emotions are information.
And behavior's a choice. Enjoy your tomorrows.
Bye.
Till next week. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the inUpowers podcast. We are grateful you are here. Please share this podcast with those you know who might need it, and follow and rate us so we can continue providing this podcast to you. Follow us on social media to see more visuals about the inUpowers, and join us next week for another episode. Until then, remember, the power to choose is in you.